This video will look into psychosocial development in early childhood, diving into self-concept, gender identity, and family life. So specifically, we'll talk about Erickson's third stage, how our self-concept and self-esteem changes, how children understand others and get better at emotional regulation. Um, we'll talk about gender development, we'll explain the terms, can't talk, transgender, gender dysphoria, and intersex. We'll also look into the major parenting styles and their consequences, the role of siblings and play, and also media. So let's get started with Erickson. So Erickson viewed early childhood as a time of building on autonomy and taking initiative. The child wants to think of an activity and carry it out without the interference of others. So they will try new tasks, join in activities with their peers, discover what they can do with the help of adults, and also make advances in their conscience development or their sense of right and wrong. Um, so how to help encourage initiative, that positive outcome of Erickson's psychosocial conflict is through praising effort and improvement. And sometimes this is referred to as process praise. Praising the process rather than like a set ability process praise. And this helps to encourage a growth mindset, right? So growth mindset, encouraging the idea that effort matters, right? Working hard matters. We want to and we can work harder and change the outcome, as opposed to a fixed mindset where we think that things are fixed or set and cannot be changed. Um, so the problem with saying things like, "Oh, you're so smart," I mean, it sounds good on the surface, right? But what it can lead to is children thinking that this is a set or stable trait, and so when they run into something difficult, they think, "Uh-oh, well, I must not be smart. I must be stupid." And so they give up because they don't see it as something that they can change. So again, emphasizing instead process, the improvements and how much effort they're putting forth. That's going to help encourage that growth mindset. I can change, I can improve, which is much more likely to help them come out on the initiative side. The guilt, the negative outcome, this occurs when extreme parental criticism or punishment for messes or mistakes occur. They're trying things on their own. Uh, they're going to spill. They're going to have accidents. Um, and if we overly criticize, we overly guilt or even punish, they're going to develop an overly strict conscience or super ego in Ericksonian, Freudian kind of terms, right? And that will cause excessive guilt, right? They'll always feel like I'm doing it wrong. I'm wrong. I shouldn't try. So getting into self-concept, as self-awareness strengthens, they'll develop this self-concept, their self-description according to various categories, such as their abilities, their attributes, and their attitudes. So self-concept is very much how we define ourselves. Self-esteem refers to our judgment about those characteristics. Um, Preschooler self concepts consist largely of observable characteristics, their appearance, their possessions, their behaviors, their likes and dislikes. This focus on external qualities is referred to as the categorical self. So, for example, a child might say, "I'm a 3-year-old girl with red hair who likes to play with Legos." Right? Very common categorical self description there. 3-year-old children typically won't reference personality traits. Like a 3-year-old typically won't say something like, "I'm shy." But later, after the age of 4, they will give responses similar to what they've heard parents and teachers, other adults say about them. Again, something to be aware of. They will incorporate those traits into their self concepts. Um, Generally, early children have positive self-esteem, often because of a lack of social comparison. So they're not interacting with a lot of other people their age, and they also tend to exaggerate. So they might think they're the fastest or the strongest. You know, Later on they'll start making those comparisons with others. Uh, self Self control. Self control is multifaceted. It includes response initiation, or the ability to not initiate a behavior before you've evaluated all the information. Response inhibition, or the ability to stop a behavior that's already begun. And then finally, delayed gratification, the ability to hold out for a larger reward by foregoing a smaller, more immediate reward. This has been tested with Walter Mischel's marshmallow tests. So children were told they could have a marshmallow now, or they could wait a while until the researcher returned to the room, and then they would be able to have 2 marshmallows. The children that were able to delay gratification, wait for the researcher to come back so they could have 2 marshmallows at the age of 4, actually predicted better academic performance and health, um, tended to have better careers, relationship success, financial success than those who took the immediate reward. I do want to point out that some of that delayed gratification is based on temperament, but some of it is also based on what you learn. And that link in the slide will take you to Michio Kaku talking about the implications of marshmallow tests and some of the influences on how children respond, such as socioeconomic status. Sex and gender, what's the difference? So when we use the term sex, typically this refers to biology, one's chromosomes, hormones, reproductive organs. The term gender typically refers to the cultural, social, and psychological meanings associated with masculinity and femininity. Gender identity refers to an individual's sense of themselves as a member of a particular gender. Gender roles refer to the expectations associated with being male or female as learned in one's culture and dependent on historical time period as well. So those expectations of how men and women should act, how they should fit into society. And then gender socialization is that process, how young children learn about gender from society, including their parents or guardians, their peers, the media, religious institutions, schools, and public policies. So various research studies have looked at this socialization process. I had a sociology professor who did research on the descriptions people would use for newborns. So actually, she got permission to go into a hospital and listen to the comments people would make about newborn infants. All of the babies that she listened in on the comments were about the same length, about the same weight, but the comments were very different just based on whether the infant was male or female. So the female infants, a lot of the comments were about how adorable, how cute, beautiful, lots of looks-based comments, and a lot of comments about being small and delicate, fragile, doll-like, or even sweet, or kind, which are, again, things that are often encouraged, socialized for females in our society. The males, a lot of comments about, I mean, yeah, there were some cute comments, of course. But a lot of the comments also focused on size and strength. So, oh, he's so big, he's so strong, which makes no sense to me because newborns can't even lift their own heads. Um, the big is kind of funny because, again, all of these infants were roughly the same size, so they weren't particularly large. But you'd hear those comments about the males, and the girls were talked about as small and delicate. Um, and oh, sports references, because in our culture, right, males commonly socialize to, be involved in sports. So she'd hear comments like, oh, he's going to be a great linebacker or things like that about a little helpless newborn baby, which I think is kind of hilarious, but it is also very telling. Another study looked at showed a infant in a room uh, with various objects like a blanket, a jack in the box, some toys like that. Uh, Half of the participants that were shown the video were told the infant's name was John. Half of them were told the infant's name was Mary. It was the same video of the same baby, right? So, just again, told different names. The infants described baby John as brave and adventurous. Infant Mary, however, was described as timid and cautious and even fearful. Again, the exact same video of the exact same child. Um, so these differences in how we talk to infants also plays out in how we treat children. Um, so females are often held more, talked to more, given more direct eye contact. Male infants, on the other hand, interactions are often mediated through a toy or some type of activity. As they get a little older, males are often given outside chores that are occasional. Females often given indoor chores that are more daily, like cooking. Parents often talk to their sons in more detail about science and will discuss numbers twice as often with their sons than they will their daughters. Daughters more likely to be talked to about emotions. And so we definitely receive a lot of messages about what what is considered um, desirable behavior, um, depending on one's gender. So some of our theories here, we have social learning theory, which is when behavior is learned through observation, modeling, reinforcement, and punishment. Children are reinforced for behaviors that are in line with gender roles and punished for behaviors that aren't. And this doesn't have to be, like a real significant reward for punishment. They can be very small things like smiling or a positive comment for reinforcement. These can be things like being, ignoring a behavior that falls outside of it, as outside of traditional gender roles as punishment, or making actual comments, or yeah, even getting more uh, severe punishments, like timeouts. Children will also observe and then imitate the behaviors of adults and older children to learn about gender roles. Cognitive social learning theory emphasizes reinforcement, punishment, and imitation, but also adds in cognitive processes. So things like attention, self regulation, and self efficacy. Once a child learns the significance of gender, they'll regulate their behavior based on their internalized gender norms. Gender schema theory states that children actively construct or develop their own conceptions of the attributes associated with maleness and femaleness, and that they use these to interpret the world, then act in accordance with those frameworks. Developmental intergroup theory. Many of our gender stereotypes are so strong because we emphasize gender a lot within our culture. When adults focus heavily on gender, children will start to pay attention to it as a key source of information about themselves and others. They will then look for any gender differences and then form rigid stereotypes based on gender that can be very difficult to change. Many children do not conform to traditional gender roles. However, only a small percentage of children actively reject the toys, clothing, and anatomy of their assigned sex. and state that they prefer the toys, clothing, and anatomy of the opposite sex. So transgender refers to identifying with the gender opposite one's natal or birth sex. Approximately 0.3% of the US population is transgender. Some, but not all children, also experience gender dysphoria, which refers to intense distress accompanying a mismatch between one's gender identity and one's biological sex. The term cisgender refers to people whose gender and sex assignment at birth match up or align. And then some people who identify as transgender are intersex, although definitely not always the case. Some people are intersex but do not identify as transgender. So intersex, this refers to being born with either an absence or some combination of male and female reproductive organs, sex hormones, and or sex chromosomes. There are many conditions that can lead to being intersex, such as Turner syndrome, the absence of or having an imperfect second X chromosome, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, which is a genetic disorder caused by an increased production of androgens, and androgen insensitivity syndrome, which is when a person has an X and a Y chromosome, but is resistant to androgens, and so doesn't develop masculine characteristics, like masculine secondary sex characteristics. People who are intersex are more common than many realize. Some research has estimated as much as 2% of the population, because sometimes you really can't tell from outside inspection if there are differences with like internal organs. I mean, how would you know? A lot of the times it gets picked up at puberty if the 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 pubertal changes are delayed or are unexpected, for the sex of the child, or sometimes it's not caught until adulthood, when because several of the conditions result in sterility. When people are trying to procreate. More medical professionals and parents are recognizing the rights of intersex individuals and are working with specialists to help children who are intersex develop a positive gender identity, because that can be very difficult. The American Academy of Pediatricians recommends adults be supportive of children who identify and express themselves contrary to gender stereotypes, so that they feel valued and can develop a secure sense of self. So let's talk about parenting styles. Parenting styles are combinations of parenting behaviors that occur over a wide range of situations and create an enduring child rearing climate. These styles can be distinguished on the basis of a couple different features: how much acceptance and involvement there is, or how much warmth and responsiveness a parent is to a child, how much control they exert, how much autonomy they grant to the child. And so when looking at these characteristics, we can rank them as low or high. And this gives us 4 different child rearing styles or parenting styles. So you can see low on warmth and responsiveness, and low on expectations and control is uninvolved. High on warmth and responsiveness and low on expectations and control is permissive. High on expectations and control and low on warmth and responsiveness is authoritarian, and high on both warmth and responsiveness and expectations and control is the authoritative style. So let's dig into these a bit more. So the authoritative style, this is generally considered the most successful approach, at least by Diane Baumrind, who's the one who developed these styles. Considered effective because it involves a high level of acceptance and involvement with the child, an adaptive amount of autonomy being granted, there's high expectations, there's very clear rules, but there are also reasons behind the rules. So the idea is really kind of more of a, misbehavior as a teaching moment, and there's room for negotiation. The outcomes for children who receive this parenting style, a lot of aspect of competence have been linked. So being independent, self-confident, having good relationships with peers and other adults. The authoritarian child rearing style. This is low in acceptance and involvement, but high in control, particularly coercive control, and low in autonomy granting. So it's very much more of a very strict, rigid rules. Do what I say, don't question it because I said so. Um, Type of parenting style. The way I try to remember which is which, because they are kind of similar sounding, authoritative and authoritarian. If you pay attention to uh, these last four letters here, particularly that T and that R. So think of for authoritative, the T with teaching, authoritarian, the R for rigid rules. And hopefully that will help keep them straight. Um, so, what was this? Children of authoritarian parents more likely to be anxious, unhappy, low in self-esteem, aggressive. Um, One form of psychological control, which is used in authoritarian parenting commonly, is where parents will intrude on and manipulate children's verbal expression, individuality, and attachments to parents. Children who are subjected to this will exhibit adjustment problems involving both anxious, withdrawn behavior and aggressive behavior, especially in the relational form. The permissive child rearing style, it's very warm and accepting, but uninvolved, uh, or overly indulgent. So these children are very much not given rules or boundaries. It's a style that some purposefully choose to take more of a friend type of role. Others end up using the style because they don't feel confident that they can change a child's behavior, and so they just kind of let let the kids make their own rules essentially. The outcomes for children, they tend to be impulsive, disobedient, rebellious, overly demanding, and dependent on adults, right? Because they're not having those rules they have to follow at home. So when they're in other situations, like at school, this can be problematic. Or they've relied so much on their parents that they may expect that level of hand holding and support uh, from other adults as well. Excuse me. The uninvolved parenting style, um, excuse me, combines a low level of acceptance and involvement with little control and general indifference to autonomy granting. At its extreme, uninvolved parenting amounts to neglect, which disrupts virtually all aspects of development. Children and adolescents with uninvolved parents often show poor emotional self-regulation, school achievement, difficulties, depression, anger. They're left very much to their own devices, um, and that they they need interaction, they need um, support, and they're not getting it. So, what influences parenting styles? Well, it's important to remember most parents do not fall completely within one category. Parenting style may also change child to child, um, depending on things like how much time and energy a parent has, whether they want others to see them as a tough or a more easygoing parent. and the type of parenting that they themselves received as a child. Culture also has a significant role on parenting. Baumrind assumes the authoritative style is best because it encourages children to be independent, self-reliant, and responsible, qualities which tend to be regarded positively in individualistic cultures like the United States, and particularly among the middle class. In collectivistic cultures, like in China, Japan, obedience and compliance are more valued behaviors, and so authoritarian style is more common. Although oftentimes there is there's also that higher involvement and warmth, so it's not quite a true authoritarian style all of the time. Additionally, African American, Hispanic, and Asian parents are more likely to use authoritarian style than non Hispanic white parents, although some question whether Baumrind's model is even appropriate to apply to other cultures. In terms of social class, parents tend to emphasize the qualities they need to survive when parenting their children. So working class parents are rewarded at their workplace for being obedient, reliable, and honest, and thus reward those same behaviors in their children. Middle class parents, on the other hand, can be rewarded at their jobs for taking initiative, being self-directed, and showing assertiveness. And in turn, they will reward those behaviors with their children. So getting into spanking, what do you think? Is it acceptable to spank children? And when we say spanking, this is usually legally defined as open hand, no implement applied to the buttocks or to the extremities, and not leaving a mark. So just wanting to clarify that a bit. If yes, under what circumstances? If no, what types of discipline do you support? Let's dive into this issue a bit more. So, with physical punishment, or also referred to as corporal punishment, um, it's not an effective disciplinary tactic because it promotes only immediate compliance rather than lasting change in behavior. Children who experience frequent harsh threats, angry physical control, and physical punishment are more likely than their age mates to develop serious mental health, emotional, social, and academic problems. Repeated harsh physical punishment has several undesirable side effects. First, the punishment models aggression, which makes it more likely that the child will be aggressive towards others. Second, harshly treated children focus on their own distress and not on the needs of others or why their behavior was wrong or problematic. And third, children, adolescents, and adults whose parents use corporal punishment are more accepting of such discipline, and it's likely that they may transfer this on to the next generation. While physical punishment is less effective than other forms of discipline, the meaning and impact of physical discipline varies sharply with its intensity level, the context of warmth and support within the parent-child relationship, and cultural approval. Some cultures, for example, view it as an effort to encourage maturity, so kind of more that having the child's best interest in mind rather than as an act of aggression. Alternatives to physical discipline. So the most effective forms of discipline build a mutually respectful bond with the child, let the child know ahead of time how they should act, and including praise for mature behavior. So as opposed to punishment, positive reinforcement is very much the more effective method of behavior change. So if they're, being rewarded for good behavior through praise, through also modeling that behavior, much more effective. Children who experience sensitivity, cooperation, and shared positive emotion in activities that they do with their parents show a firmer development of conscience, of that sense of right and wrong. Parents who use positive strategies focus on long-term life skills like cooperation and problem solving, and this also helps to reduce the need for punishment as well. So some alternatives for we can use providing timeouts for inappropriate behavior or withdrawing privileges. You may ignore potentially small annoyances rather than looking for like every little thing to punish them for. Giving choices is also helpful. So if they're resistant to something, giving them some reasonable options, helping them identify their emotions and learn how to calm down when they're feeling upset. All of these are great ways to help them learn about why their behavior is problematic. Um, Again, this also helps to internalize that sense of right and wrong, the why behind it, right? Sibling relationships. Siblings have a unique relationship, and it plays an important role in developing social skills. So it can help teach empathy, sharing, cooperation, negotiation, and conflict resolution. Sibling relationships are influenced by the quality of the parent-child relationship, the child's psychological adjustment, and peer relationships. Um, these things, parent-child relations, psychological adjustments, sibling relationships also in turn influence peer relationships. Sibling conflicts depend on age. So more than half of conflicts tend to be over property rights. In middle childhood, conflicts are often over controlling the social situation, such as what game to play, disagreement over facts or opinions, or rude behaviors. How siblings deal with conflict depends on age and the subject of the conflict. Children who use non coercive strategies are more likely to reach a compromise and to feel better about the relationship overall. Play is seen as a developmentally helpful phenomenon by various theorists. Mildred Parten noted how play develops in 2 to 5 year olds. So younger children engage in non-social forms of play more often than older children do. By 5 years of age, associative and cooperative are the most common forms. So let's talk about these types. Unoccupied play refers to behavior that seems random and without a particular goal. This is the least common type. Solitary play is when children play by themselves, not interacting with any other people. Onlooker refers to watching other children play. Parallel play is playing near another child with similar toys, but they're not interacting. So maybe they're both playing in a sandbox, one's digging a hole, one's playing with a car. They're not interacting at all, though. Like parallel lines, right? They never meet. They stay in their own lane. Associative play. This is where we're getting actual social play, right? So associative play, they interact with each other, they share toys, but they're not working towards a common goal. So they might say, "Hey, that's a nice hole you're digging," or "What a cool car," but they're still kind of doing their own thing. Cooperative, on the other hand, where they're interacting to achieve a common goal, like maybe they build a sandcastle together, for example. Although the forms of play emerge in the order shown, all of them do coexist in early childhood. So just because you're capable of cooperative play doesn't mean you never engage in solitary or parallel play, right? You still can do those sometimes too. The media, oh, big influence. Most American families have a television, and half own three or more. Children are watching more TV than ever before. Two-thirds of children 6 and under watch television every day, usually for 2 hours. Uh, there has been documented negative impacts on language and attention, even when TV is on in the background while they play, do something more hands-on. Young children who have 2 or more hours of mobile device use show more aggression, tantrums, inattention, shorter sleep duration, higher risk of behavioral problems, and increasingly fail to meet motor language and problem solving milestones. The American Academy of Pediatricians recommends that children under the age of 2 have no screen time and instead be engaged in hands-on exploration and social interaction with the real world, as children at this age have difficulty learning through digital media. 2 to 5 years of age, 1 hour maximum of quality programs, like educational programs that are co-viewed with a caregiver to help them understand, is okay. There's a strong suggestion also by the AAP to avoid using media to distract or to soothe, as it can lead to potential difficulty in limiting device use and may prevent children learning to self-regulate their emotions. Childcare. So childcare has become increasingly common as more mothers work outside the home. 65% of mothers of preschool age children work outside the home, and 71.5% of mothers of school age children in the United States. Research from 10 different countries shows that mothers actually spent more time caring for children in 2012 than in 1965, with France as the only exception of the countries surveyed. The average mother spent 54 minutes per day caring for children in 1965, compared to 104 minutes in 2012. Fathers also spent more time with their children, with an average of 59 minutes per day in 2012, compared to only 16 in 1965. A comprehensive, diverse longitudinal study found no difference in the development of children cared for by their parents compared to those in childcare for more than 10 hours per week. So sometimes people worry, like, oh, sending them to childcare going to be problematic. No. Child development was much more impacted, though, by parent and family characteristics than childcare facilities, although there is a difference between having high quality childcare and low quality childcare. So high quality childcare is determined by things like adult to child ratios, group size, and the caregiver's educational and training levels. Lower quality childcare has been correlated with more behavioral problems and poor cognitive, language, and school readiness. Getting into some difficult topics, child maltreatment. Child maltreatment has existed in all human societies, but it is especially common in large industrialized nations. It includes 4 major types: neglect, so not getting one's basic needs met for food, water, shelter; physical abuse, like physically hitting or slapping or things like that; psychological maltreatment, so emotional abuse, name calling, a lot of shaming and stuff like that would fall under that category. And then sexual abuse, inappropriate touching, or molestation, things like that. Child Protective Services received 4.1 million referrals for abuse involving 7.5 million children in 2017 alone. That is a rate of 31.8 per 1,000 children. So out of every 1,000 children, 31.8 referrals. Most abuse is committed by parents, about 80%, some by relatives, about 7%, and the rest by parents, unmarried partners, school officials, camp counselors, and other adults. Generally, mothers engage in neglect more often than fathers, whereas fathers tend to engage more in sexual abuse. Maternal and paternal rates of physical and psychological abuse are fairly similar. Infants and preschoolers are at greatest risk for neglect, preschool and school age children for physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. So related to this, stress and ACEs. So stress is not always bad. So positive stress, also referred to as eustress, is needed and occurs when we face brief, mild to moderate stressors in our day-to-day lives and is buffered by receiving support from caring adults. This type of stress is important for building coping skills and resilience. Tolerable, tolerable stress refers to more intense or longer lasting events, like moving to a new town or losing a loved one. It can still be managed fairly well, particularly with caring support. Toxic stress, on the other hand, is when a child experiences chronic, excessive stress that they are unable to cope with, especially if they don't have caregiver support. Being exposed to high levels of the stress hormone cortisol over time can shrink the hippocampus, impacting memory, and hypersensitize the amygdala, leading to a lower threshold for stress. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, refer to all types of abuse, neglect, and other potentially traumatic experiences that occur before the age of 18. Abuse, neglect, having a parent incarcerated, or mental illness, those things can all be ACEs. Kaiser Permanente and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention did a study determining that ACEs are the root cause for many social, emotional, and cognitive impairments that lead to an increased risk of unhealthy, self-destructive behaviors, violence, chronic health issues, low life potential, and even premature death. A recent example was the separation of thousands of children from their parents at the US-Mexico border. Not only were these children under extreme stress from escaping their previous homes, they were also cut off from their typical source of support and care, their parents. Being separated from their parents places children at a higher risk of medical conditions, obesity, impaired immune function, lower IQ scores, as well as psychological disorders like anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Children still have increased risk, even after being reunited with their parents. The impact of COVID-19 on early childhood. So children account for about 14% of COVID-19 cases. And while most experience mild or even no symptoms, children with underlying health issues are more likely to suffer severe illness. In some instances, a rare condition follows COVID infection, known as multi-system inflammatory syndrome, or MIS-C. And this is when different parts of the body become inflamed, such as the heart, lungs, brain, skin, eyes, or gastrointestinal organs. The reason for this occurrence in some children is unknown. For most children, cases are mild, and the mortality rate is only about 0.01% in the United States. The pandemic increased stress for many children with social isolation, parental job loss, and school closures. Child abuse and intimate partner violence increased, as did parents' mental health issues and substance use. The greatest impact was on low-income and ethnic minority children who are already at greater risk of experiencing ACEs. So, covering all of those, covering those aspects of psychosocial development. Thank you.